This is a portable line array, and we're about to make one with a tool-changing 3D printer. So, the good folks over at Prusa have recently stumbled upon the channel, immediately noticing that I don't have a giant Core XY machine with 5 toolheads, so here's a giant Core XY machine with 5 toolheads. Conveniently enough, the box opens with a tear strip, and there's our little diversity hire being very helpful. Upon the initial unboxing, we are met with candy! Fittingly, an extra large bag to go with this extra large, mostly pre-assembled contraption. All that remains is to attach the screen and however many extruders the machine came with. Needless to say, this is the maxed out version, and after a successful power-up, we are guided through some initial alignment and calibration where, one after another, the extruders are homed to this temporarily inserted alignment pin. Afterwards, something called a Bonkers Benchy from the included USB drive seen here performed in a lovely Galaxy Black PLA. 17 minutes later, we crossed the finish with what I would describe as the lightest 3D Benchy I've ever printed, and the quality is bang on as well, so between that, the massive build volume and the 5 extruders, I think I'm all set to make something extra large and multicolored. To that effect, Prusa had also included some filament, as I can never have too much of this black and orange PETG. Quite the quality material, much like the stuff that I used to print Jammer Mini, and while that was mostly just a head nod to a 20-year-old boombox, how about something to keep up with a modern party speaker as they are now called? Introducing Jammer XL. This is a line array consisting of 6 tectonic balanced mode radiators and a pair of W5 series subwoofers from Tangband. The side-firing bass drivers are shielded behind a couple of diffuser plates. Around the back, there is an easy-to-modify battery/amplifier compartment, and just on a whim, I decided that we needed some taillights, so that'll be some translucent material back here, as well as along the front, thus putting at least 3 extruders to work. The 2 halves of the main body are joined in the middle, tongue and groove as per usual, a couple of chamber dividers, and some accessory panels for the knobs and the buttons and so forth. The twin subwoofer stage is aligned for output down to 30 Hz, with the line array handling everything above 90 Hz. And while it may look imposing, rather than sheer loudness, the object here is to approximate a line source which, unlike a point source, forms a cylindrical wavefront carrying the acoustic energy with less decay over the same span. In other words, it can reach a distant listener without simultaneously deafening the nearby listener. Early 1990s street toughs, eat your heart out. So yeah, let's go ahead and make that physically exist, and the machine makes it super easy, starting with the left half. Here's a bit of the first layer, 20% gyroid infill, some V0 natural self-extinguishing filament for the translucent areas, and on it goes, just like that, wasting no time between tool changes, which begins to matter on a 189-hour print like this one. Luckily, the spool holders on the XL extend to fit these 2-kilogram rolls, giving us plenty of time to have a look at something new for the bench. This is a box that I'll open in just 1 second. First, let's quickly talk about all this nonsense right here. So, every media computer that I have follows some version of this chain, starting with the machine itself as a transport unit, followed by a DAC converting the signal to analog, followed by a DSP correcting the response and so forth, followed by the power amplifier boosting the signal to speaker level, and then of course the speakers themselves. On the bench, my 2 DACs are the Dayton Audio DATs version 3 for loudspeaker testing and the Zoom UAC2 for audio playback. The analog output from the UAC2 then passes through the mini DSP 2x4 and then into the topping TP21 for amplification. What's more, with the spare set of DSP outputs, I can plug in a second amplifier like I did for the demo of the Trihexa. Speaking of past videos, if we go back even further, I once attempted to consolidate some of these different components into a single 3D printed DSP/amplifier type box, which I ultimately scrapped for its poor signal-to-noise ratio, pivoting instead to a modified Behringer EPQ304 and another one of those mini DSP 2x4s. By the way, the print is doing just fine, don't worry about it. Anyway, out of nowhere, this guy named Stas is like, hey, check it out. Unlike you, my team doesn't suck at making awesome DSP amplifiers. In fact, the Acoustas AC650 doesn't just replace an amplifier and a DSP, but the DAC as well. So it's just a USB connection from the computer straight into here, and then you get 6 channels of output through these Phoenix-style terminal blocks, which are perfectly suited for quickly swapping between groups of speakers. Anyhow, for the moment this will just sit somewhere around here and drive the little orange pods, cut back to the print, and wow, that looks pretty f***ed up. It's really not, you just sort of put it back and the print recovers without so much as a layer shift. Turns out, however, that little blobs of filament can sometimes form around the tips of the nozzles, and once they drip back down onto the print, they can solidify into an obstacle for the subsequent pass. Luckily, most of this tends to happen somewhere along the very compliant wipe tower, but sooner or later, a blob was bound to land on a comparatively immovable print itself, resulting in a toolhead dislodging, or less ideally, a layer shift. So that's a 5-day adventure to nowhere. Nevertheless, on each retry, even with some adjusted temperature setting as prescribed by the folks over at Prusa, these intermittent blobs would persist, until eventually I thought to get ahead of the problem entirely and just pause the print every several hours to pick the nozzles clean with a set of tweezers. I also picked up some of these brass wire brushes, which I found to do an even better job. So, between that and the occasional trim, leveling of the wipe tower, the print continues onward without issue. Here's the first layer making up the side of the amplifier compartment, and it looks like we have some edge lifting. This isn't the end of the world as long as we level out by the time we get to the other side of that wall, and yeah, it should be okay. The following morning I walked in on a crash scene with the extruder unable to park after having already printed a portion of a shifted layer. Luckily, anytime the machine detects such a crash, once you go to resume, it is followed immediately by an XY homing routine, which, as you can see here, managed to bring things back on track, though not without this little stitch pattern, which I'll see about removing later. Either way, as long as I'm there to preemptively clean the nozzles every several hours, the print inches steadily onward until eventually we cross the finish. This is what maxing out the Prusa XL build volume looks like in practice, and if you're driven enough to attempt this in color, you are looking at a week plus of continuous operation. That gets us to the halfway mark, and before the heat bed ever has a chance to cool down, we're off to the races once again with the second half. I'm obviously not about to take it easy on the XL. These machines are designed to operate non-stop, and this one is about halfway through a 16-day test. Meanwhile, Prusa's like, hell yeah, here's some more filament. So yeah, no problems with the second half. Here's the first few layers of the amplifier compartment, and it looks to have stuck down. Long story short, the print completed successfully and with no incident. So this is where we get after all the little bits like the chamber dividers, the diffuser plates, the accessory panels, the tri-glides, and all the stuff for the back cover. Afterwards, before it all comes together, I still want to see what can be done about these jet black artifacts having protruded through the orange during their layer shift. And for the most part, they just sort of crumble off, so no harm, no foul. The supports come away without a fuss, even as I hadn't used any special interface material, mostly just the orange and the white PETG as you can see here, and the scaffolding beneath the outer lip of the base port was especially satisfying to remove. More impressively still, these tiny insets for the 5mm brass fittings transition from the orange along the face to the jet black along the inside, and even here the supports release without anything having fused, which indicates good alignment between the nozzles. So, with all that out of the way, here's me jamming 36 of these M3 brass inserts into the face panel, followed by the M4 inserts pretty much everywhere else. Afterwards, the first thing that I'm inclined to populate with electronics is the back cover. Here's a 21V battery module from Dayton Audio, and this one holds 5 3.7V lithium-ion cells. The tiny standoffs are both glued and screwed into place, with the M3 screws threading directly into the print. A quick test fit just to ensure that I'm still okay at measuring stuff, and this is where we lock it down. The amplifiers next, more or less the same deal, and here's what it all looks like put together. This is followed by the batteries, and these are just your standard 26650 lithium-ion cells. Once they're all loaded in, a 20V power supply gets them charging. Next, I want to give all the translucent areas a subtle glow, and these self-adhering LED strips ought to work just fine, albeit perhaps with some extra contact cement, merely to ensure that they don't rattle loose. And just for funsies, I'm also going to do some red ones in the back. So, those all get wired in parallel. Here's an accessory plate with a couple of mounting holes for switches. We'll do red for power and blue for illumination. As always, plenty of reusable adhesive to gasket around all the openings, and once the panel's in place, a quick check to make sure that it all works. It's definitely not a light show, which is fine because this is a speaker. Up next, Sophie emerges to apply some JB weld along the inner ledge of the line array, and there's the chamber divider for that. This is followed by the inner ledge of the subwoofer compartment, and once everything's in place, a 25-pound weight keeps it that way until it's time for the two halves to be wired and joined together as well. What's more, all the additional filament is already putting in work. Anyhow, the following day we have this one solid chunk all set to be stuck with even more reusable adhesive, then fitted with 6 balanced mode radiators. 3 of them wired in parallel on the left, and the same on the right. Ideally, this entire speaker would be programmed to operate in mono, with a second one set up for the opposite channel, but I'd also like to retain the ability to run this single unit in what I would loosely refer to as stereo. Up next, the 2 side-firing subwoofers, once again with an airtight gasket of adhesive, followed by some hefty diffuser plates, ultimately bringing the bulk of the contraption to 78 cm across. For a quick bench test with my brand new Acoustas multi-tool, I set up a couple of these terminal blocks with some alligator clips, unplugged the orange pods, plugged in the new probes, which then made it super easy to patch into the speaker, and with an RTA mic in place, I can quickly access the DSP, clear it out, set up a couple of channels for the line array, do a sweep, and yeah, even without psychoacoustic smoothing, this is impressively tame. What's more, with the smoothing applied, there is precious little here to correct, perhaps a 6 dB proactive high-pass filter at 90 Hz, and then I'll enable 2 more channels for the bottom end, setting both to mono. The subwoofers perform down to 30 Hz at the low end, and clear through the 90 Hz crossover point at the high end, so that'll just be a 90 Hz low-pass filter, and a steep one at that. I'm not gonna bore you with tuning, suffice it to say, between the filters and the 15-band parametric equalizer, I can make this chunk of plastic read like a studio monitor. What's more, all the same controls are available through the mobile app as well. Anyway, now that all the groups of speakers have been tested, it's time to make this thing portable. This is where I wire in the 4-channel Dayton amp, patch in with a little programmer, and build a signal chain in Sigma Studio to allow for more or less the same kind of tuning as I just demonstrated with the AC650 and with an equally decent final response. I did, however, notice a slight bench rattle, so a couple of actual foot pads wouldn't be a bad idea. This is neoprene sponge foam done extra crispy, slathered in contact cement and applied to the bottoms of the 2 printed feet. Around the back, there's still a matter of getting the compartment closed up, so one final check, making sure that everything works. And since it's pretty much guaranteed that at least a couple of these wires will end up getting stuck in a cooling fan, as an afterthought I also made this little press-on grill. So that is now a fully self-contained unit, and as a finishing touch, Sophie's back with her Cricket to make a logo for the strap. A couple of tri-glides to hold it all in place, and there it is, the world's first 3D printed line array boombox that also makes for a decent nightlight. We'll run through a demo here in a bit, plenty of time to grab the good headphones, but in the meantime, some final thoughts about the XL as I put an end to this lanky eyesore with a little side project. Right away, with a build volume of 360mm on all 3 axes, there is now the prospect of designing large floor-standing objects that come together in just a few pieces. This is Lamp XL, just to keep with the theme. None of this is serious. It has a footprint of 350 by 350mm and a height of 1878mm. Anyhow, as you'd rightfully expect from a Prusa, the print quality has been top-notch, and the blobs I described earlier seem to form only when printing with this jet black PETG, which, all things considered, is still quite manageable. The build plate adhesion is excellent. In fact, I had originally sliced the translucent parts for the Orange Storm Giga as a pair of continuous 700mm tall pieces, though ultimately all the build volume in the world means jack shit if the first layer won't stick. Meanwhile, the exact same roll of PLA, when extruded across the satin powder-coated sheet on the XL, maintains a firm grip for the 50 hours that it takes to max out the build height. And then it does it again, and again, and again on a different extruder as I wound up with a partial clog on number 5. In fact, therein lies another practical benefit of all these separate tool heads. If one of them fails, just move over to the next one and party on. Afterwards, swap the nozzle and you're back in business. All things considered, my only gripe with the machine is that I can't keep an eye on it from the desktop as I've grown accustomed to with most of the other printers. And even then, there's only so much that I can bitch about a problem solved with a $30 IP camera. We even have one down here to keep an eye on what the dog is chewing, given that she likes to scatter her toys next to the power cords and the like. Anyhow, the machine is accurate, and this is further evidenced by the clean, easily removable supports, proper dimensionality around things like the threaded inserts, and everything fitting exactly as it did in CAD. So let's just speed through the rest of this, and now I can put a normal plate back over the wall socket. No sense having all this bullshit in plain sight when a power strip can just as easily go inside the lamp. That's what all those vents are for, and there's even a little zip tie holder to wrangle the cables toward the rear. Here's the initial voice-activated power-up, and a happy wife for scale. This, in my humble opinion, is what 3D printing is all about. Just making useful/usable things for around the house, as there's only so much practical utility that you can squeeze out of that Mandalorian helmet. At any rate, with the basic bitch lamp out of the picture, it is finally time for a sound demo. And as a palate cleanser, I decided to bring Jammer Mini back out for a quick listen.
So I'm just gonna set it up. Oh, that looks cool.
Yeah, well, gives you a good size comparison, doesn't it?
That does.
By the way, you can talk over this. We're still just getting a level.
Palate cleanser.
Mm-hmm.
Palate cleanser.
Yep. Good?
I don't know why that's funny. I don't know why that's funny. You just picked the noise away.
Ready?
Mm-hmm. My eyes immediately twitched. That was amazing. Oh.
Why don't I turn it down a little bit?
A little bit. It is midday, but still.
Initial thoughts.
A lot boomier than I was anticipating. The little air around my feet was vibrating.
All the way down. This will play down to about 27 hertz, but I have it self-filtered around 30, so
Cool. I like that it's nicely capturing all of the little top tinkling noises too.
oh yeah, and the line array is in stereo.
Okay.
Stereo. You're not really getting much stereo with something like this.
It's
but
very flat.
three speakers are doing one thing, three speakers are doing the other. Good raspiness.
And it catches that first pluck really nicely. Oh, this is great!
Right, that house is vibrating.
Yeah, parts of the house are actually vibrating. Oh, that's great. Oh god, I love that. And that was really funny. Okay, I wasn't expecting that to actually work like that.
So, now, your final impressions.
Oh, that's fantastic. I honestly was not expecting Hiatus to come out that deep either. I have only ever heard that specific portion of a drop in a set of Skull Candy.
So as far as boomboxes or party speakers, how does this stand up?
Holy shit! I honestly wasn't expecting it to be that awesome.
I'll take a holy shit. Alright, let's box this up.
Yes!
A small souvenir for Mr. Joe Prusa, who, come to find out, is no stranger to matters of sound reproduction himself. Speaking of sound, the Acoustas AC650 removes a lot of modular clutter from the workbench. In fact, there's other places where I'd like to solve for that as well, so that is now a thing. Anyway, for the next chapter in the fate of Jammer XL, I will leave a link to where it may potentially surface. That aside, here you go, free files, along with my preemptive condolences to all your neighbors. Don't forget to rate the video as you see fit, subscribe if you're so inclined, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!